Hi, and welcome to Connect Safely Live. I'm your host, Larry Magid, and also your co-host is with us, Kerry Gallagher. Hi, Kerry.
Hi, Larry. How's it going today?
It's going well, and I'm real excited about our guest today. Mindy Brooks is the Director of User Experience at Google, and she also heads up the Google Play product for user experiences, and is very active in everything children related, their Family Link and all the children programs. So we're really excited from a standpoint of a parent and an educator. And Kerry, you are both a parent and an educator. I'm a former educator and also a parent of older kids. But Mindy, welcome to Connect Safely Live.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So I want to start out by talking a little bit about Google Play and how you approach kids and families, both within Google Play and the Family Link app, which I'd love for you to talk about, because I know that's a very useful app. Kerry's family uses it. I don't use it with my adult kids, but I have tested it with them. They actually did offer to be guinea pigs just to try it out, and it's a great app.
Thank you. You know, we've been working on kids and family related products for a number of years now. We launched Family Link years ago. We're focused on helping parents with providing them with parents and families, with providing them with abilities to help with screen time and really be able to have conversations about what's appropriate balance for each family. So Family Link was one of the first things we've launched here at Google. In addition, on Google Play, we've developed a Design for Families program, and over the years, we've continued to make improvements there. And one of the recent launches that we're probably talking a lot about today is our new Teacher Approved app. So we've just launched Teacher Approved apps in the Play Store and a new revamped For Kids tab where you can find all apps that are teacher approved. And in there, you'll find much more detail about why teachers approved it. Is it fun? Does it spark curiosity? Does it help your child learn? Does it help with creative play? You'll find all sorts of fun details about the app to help you make a decision about what works best for your family.
That's great. So how does an app qualify as a teacher? Of course, I'm curious,
Yes.
but also as a parent. Who are the teachers who approve them, and how do you connect with them, and what are sort of the criteria that they use to let folks know?
Great question. So we essentially have been working on this for a number of years with faculty from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, as well as Georgetown. Our two primary faculty is Sandy Calvert and Joe Blatt, both of which have really worked with us over the years to refine a set of frameworks for how we rate and review apps. So we'll be looking across a number of dimensions, which are like age appropriateness, quality of the experience, everything from the interaction design to the visual design to enrichment and the learning components of it, and just pure delight. How much delight does it have for a child? Will this spark a child's interest? So we're looking at a number of factors, and those that pass the bar then get the teacher approved badge associated with it. To your second question.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go for it. No, go ahead. Continue. Sorry.
You're asking the second question on who the teachers are, or is that what the question is? So we've worked with a number of teachers all over the U.S. To rate and review apps for us. So we currently have over 250 teachers from every state that are looking at our apps and reviewing them for us and providing feedback.
Great. I think Larry has a follow-up.
Yeah. So Mindy, I'm curious, you mentioned about the app's delightfulness, I think is the term you used. And I think that's a great term. But it makes me think about the relationship between fun and learning. So I know you used to work at Sesame Street, so you have a lot of experience when it comes to fun ways to learn. I'm old enough to remember school wasn't always like that when I was a child, and we had learning and we had entertainment, and they were sort of separate boxes, right? Now they're combined. I'm curious, where you draw the lines and how you determine to what extent learning needs to be fun and to what extent learning doesn't need to be fun.
Oh, great question. I do want to be clear that our apps in the teacher approved badge that get the teacher approved badge aren't just learning. They can also be just plain fun, and they don't have to be connected. But I do have to say a kid learns more and better if they are able to have fun with something. So Sesame Street's a great example. If you have Cookie Monster teaching something about cookies, a kid is much more likely to remember the message about that that segment of the show than it is if they're not. So pairing the two is just a great combination. It's much more engaging for a child, and the messages just are much deeper. So,
yeah, and if I can follow up, right, we're in this situation now, as you know. In fact, there's so many questions pertaining to the situation we're now with people sheltering at home in terms of screen time, which is, a different scenario than we had prior to COVID-19, but also, types of screen time. I mean, we've always talked about learning versus entertainment versus gaming versus all the various ways in which we can interact with screens. But given the situation we're in now, where screens are really the only way we can socialize, and in many cases, the primary way that children are learning, how do we approach screen time today that may be different than we might have back in January?
I think we have to use the screens, and we use them well. And I'm a firm believer that there's good content out there, and that we can find the good content, which is part of the reason why we launched this program earlier. We were expecting to launch it later in the year, but because we saw such a need in finding good content, that's why we decided to accelerate the launch. So I think screens, I think the age-old argument, this dates back to television back in the day, which can a child get something out of a screen? And I think the answer is yes. When done well, when created thoughtfully, there can be a lot of good things that come from screens and the time with screens. So I think our goal here with the Teacher Approved program is to help elevate the good stuff out there and help parents be able to find information about what the content is and what's useful for their families. So in this age where they're having to spend a ton of time on screens at home, that they have a lot of options available for them.
It's funny. I used to be the PBS Kids used to have an advisory board that I sat on, and this question came up all the time because of these sort of arbitrary screen time recommendations from American Pediatric Association and others, and to distinguish between quote good screen time and quote bad screen time. Now, I think most people agree that in normal times kids should run out and be outside, and nobody should be glued to a screen 24/7. But talk a little bit more about the distinction between time on screens that are, how can I say this, productive, and times on screens that maybe really should be more carefully limited.
Yeah, I think according to the experts out there, it's just saying that all content is created equal. So I think really thinking about, I think as a parent, you need to decide what's right for your family,
right,
and what values you have and what you want your child to be getting out of screens, and then make a decision out of that. But definitely, I think it's being really taking a look at what content your child is using and what you want them to have, and making a choice from there is the most important thing.
So I want to go back a little bit to what falls into those teacher approved apps. And I think it's really easy to talk about the content that's for younger children and for preschool. I think that stuff tends to be co-chosen by the parents, and parents tend to co-view. And, there's a lot of really good stuff out there. In my home, I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, right? And they have opinions and preferences about what they think is fun and what is delightful and what is worth their time. And so how can parents, or maybe you could just give some examples of what falls under those teacher approved apps that might not just pass the teacher test and the parent test, but will pass the test of your average middle schooler or your average upper elementary age kid who would rather maybe watch, one of those YouTube famous families do kind of silly stunts instead of on YouTube, instead of, engage in an educational app experience.
Yeah, this is a great question. We really, it took us a while to get to a place of launching this because we were really trying to listen to what are those intricacies of delight, right? And really understand what a child is using versus what might be seen as a teacher approved, for example. So I will say that it's taken a long time to get to a place where we were able to refine our ways of rating, to be able to incorporate signals from what we were hearing from parents and families through research on what their kids would like, and make sure that we're taking those factors into consideration. So 8-year-old sense of humor is totally different than a 3-year-old, right? And really thinking about that when we defined our rubrics and our content rubrics, to take into account those developmental differences.
That's really great. So I think also what might be helpful for parents here, now that you've talked about what content is available this way, is to talk about the connection between the Google Play Store and Google Family Link, and what are some simple things that parents can do to set that up at home and then use it on the fly. I've found it really easy and helpful to use to promote conversation with my children, not to control them, but to really help me and they feel like we understand each other in terms of how we use technology. But I think people hear these names and then they're like, all right, but how do I even get started with that? So maybe you can explain how families can get started so that they can start accessing these things and having these conversations that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, first of all, it's just downloading it from the Play Store and getting started, and you can set up your kid's device and use Family Link. Oh, the best thing about Family Link that I love is the ability to use it remotely. So it doesn't have to be, you need to take your child's device and set up any type of controls locally on the device. You can be wherever you are to be able to kind of check in and be able to set screen time limits or extend bedtimes, that sort of thing. So there's really great features available within Family Link. But yeah, I would start by downloading it from the Play Store and get started. You can also go to our website and learn more about it before you go and use it. But we'd really love for you to take a look.
Yeah, so I want to show our users because full disclosure, we're a mixed platform family here. So I have an iPhone and I have Family Link right here on my iPhone. So this is one of my daughters, and you can see that if I want to view, I can see she actually has no activity today because she's been on her school issued Chromebook doing schoolwork. But if I showed you later, if I can view yesterday, these are the apps where she spent her time and it shows me exactly where it is. And then if I want to set limits, I could set that up on this other screen, which was just one tap to get to. So just from a parent perspective of somebody who doesn't work at Google, I find it really helpful. And it was pretty easy to set up, and it is cross-platform. So if there are parents who don't have their own device that has a Play Store on it, like they have an iPhone, they can download it from the App Store to access it too. I think that's important to note. I know a lot of schools have been distributing Chromebooks to kids in order for them to do their schoolwork. And I want to also mention and reassure parents that their schools have already put certain safety standards in place on the school issued Chromebook. So parents shouldn't feel like they have to put Family Link on school Chromebooks. This would be something that they would put on the devices that their children own or that they own, right, Mindy?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's for that personal usage.
Great, great.
So the whole question of parental controls is something I've given a lot of thought to over the years, because they're great and they can be extremely important. But at some point, children get older, right? They, 12-year-olds become 13-year-olds and 16-year-olds become 18-year-olds eventually, and they go off and they need the critical thinking skills. That I like to say the computer between their brain needs to be in place as opposed to any software that you might run on a device. So talk to me about two things. One is, with young children, how do you explain to them that you're using a parental control tool so that they understand that mom and dad have some, visibility into what they're doing, and mom and dad have the ability to control what they have access to? Because I think we would all agree that stealth mode is not the ideal way to do this. You really do want it to be a conversation. And then also, as children get older, how do you begin to wean them off of the controls and, again, turn on that software that runs up here as opposed to the one inside the machine?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oftentimes we encourage parents to have the conversation when they start the first device for their child. When they give the kid their first device, that's when you start to have those conversations about what a parent is going to be able to see. And Family Link, we are very clear about what a parent can see, and we also show a child what a parent can see. So there's transparency both ways. So that's one critical thing. So having that conversation early and being clear and explicit about it. But again, it's also about what's right for your family and making that decision as a parent yourself. But to the second point, Larry, which is a great one, which is how do you essentially move a child from training wheels to riding a bike?
Right.
And to be able to develop those sense of balance and not wobble and fall too far to the right or to the left. And I think it really is about, in just every stage of child development, what is when a child is actually ready and knowing where your child is, to be able to then kind of take off the training wheels. So we really just encourage having those conversations above and beyond. And I think, Kerry, you mentioned that that's something that you do with your kids. You have those conversations. I think that's probably just the best way to be able to know when your child's ready.
Sure. Yeah. I wanted to mention a brief plug for ConnectSafely.org, because we have a lot of great conversation starters in the guides that we've made available for parents around this. Well, I think that these parental control tools, the phrase parental control always bothers me a little bit, because my job as a parent is not to control the child, right? It's to empower the child and excite the child and help them learn how to manage themselves and their own interests and emotions and all of those things. So anyway, but to move to another topic, I think to kind of return to our conversation a little bit about screen time, under these circumstances, my children are definitely engaging in more screen time than ever right now. But I'm not overly concerned about it for a couple of reasons. Part of their screen time has to do with their schoolwork that's being assigned from their school. And then part of it is what they're doing for fun, in addition to going outside and all of that. So how can we help parents understand that, I mean, or what is your message, I guess, to parents, that how these circumstances are unusual, and that screens are, you know, they're being used for more purposes than ever before, right? So what is your take on that, and how parents should be thinking about and reflecting on what their children are doing and spending their day, and how we as adults are spending our day with screens too?
Sure, I think that's a big part of it, is how we model it ourselves too, right? I would say, and then this, I think above and beyond is where our goal is to provide tools for parents. And so making the teacher approved apps is one thing that we can do, because we know screen time is up. Like, I mean, all of us, we're all at home. So I think our goal is to help provide more resources, so that way parents can best find the content they want for their kids, because the screen time is up, and that's part of it. And I think for all of us, we just need to have a little bit of grace, because it's hard right now, and it's hard for everyone, and that we just need to be able to, you know, be able to find good things and get through this time. And I think that's our goal, is to help parents in the midst of that.
And it is amazing to think about how technology has empowered us during this period. I mean, there are no, you know, there's nothing good about COVID-19, but the silver lining in this very dark cloud is that we are connected. I mean, in fact, I don't even like the term social isolation, or, you know, social distancing. I don't feel socially distant. I feel physically distant from people. And gosh, I would love to have my kids over and hang out with my friends. But the reality is that we have used the technology that Google and Apple and Facebook and all the other companies are providing us in ways that really have made it a lot easier, both for adults and children, to get through this awful period.
Sure.
So, and I want to follow up, changing subjects a little bit. It won't surprise you, Mindy, that I Googled you. And you know about Google, right? It's this wonderful search engine.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah. And one of the things I found is an article you had, I think, co-written about augmented reality. I don't know if when we were back at Sesame Workshop, because I know PBS Kids and Sesame have done some work on that. But I'm fascinated between the intersection of technology and the physical world, and ways in which, and of course, a lot of people don't even make a distinction anymore between technology and the physical world. But there are physical objects. I mean, there are things. Actually, this is a physical object. It's actually a box for my Google earbuds. But my point is that augmented reality, it's still in its infancy. But I was wondering if you talk about that as a learning and play tool.
Oh my goodness, yes. You know, Larry, your same fascination with it is mine as well. So this was back at my time at Sesame, and we had at that time what we called an innovation lab. We were really trying to develop best practices for thinking about new technologies for children. So a lot of these articles came out of that, and we did multiple things at CES with AR for preschoolers. And at that time, people were like, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing with AR for preschoolers?" And you know, it really was about creativity and imagination. AR was able to kind of expand what is in this real world for a child in a way that was really interesting with the blend of physical toys. So we did a lot of work at looking at that. So it sparked a lot of curiosity. Kids were able to think a little bit outside of the box in terms of how we were, in terms of just traditional play in many ways. And it was a really interesting tool, and is a tool that can be used to blend the real world and the digital world.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I find it in some ways more interesting than virtual reality because of the fact you're still connected to your surroundings, yet you're being augmented with whatever the computer or the technology can provide. Now, it hasn't gone as far as I thought it would go yet. Do you have a sense as to where it might be going in the near future?
You know, I don't know if I have a total sense on that, but I will give an anecdote here. I would say, you know, I watch my nieces, and to see them using little face filters, the AR filters, has totally changed the way in which that they consume and use technology. It's normal for them. So I think the more embedded it gets, I think the more interesting it will become for children as they continue to grow. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. Sure.
I never thought of it before, but what I'm doing right now is a form of augmented reality in a way, in the sense that we're here, but there are my children when they were young children. They're not young anymore.
I wanted to mention something that we discovered, I don't know, maybe a month ago, that if you have a device that has an advanced enough camera, a personal device, and you just go to google.com and you type in the name of any animal like bear or eagle or anything, one of the top results will be for you to tap on, and it'll show you an augmented reality image of that animal in your room with you. So I wish I could demonstrate it here effectively, but I feel like I would end up jostling you all around and you would get motion sick. But I used the example bear because we did a bear and it was incredible. It filled our entire living room. And you can also do an eagle, and you can see how their wingspan is so large. And then what's really fun is you can take a picture. So I took a picture of like an eagle landing on my dog's head, and he had no idea what was happening because it was augmented reality. So that's just a fun little tool that parents could use like right now with their children in their living room. Just go to google.com on your smartphone, and if depending on the quality of the camera on the back, you'll have access to that tool or not. And that's a great learning activity. And I did that, like I mentioned, with my upper elementary students. So it isn't, I mean, children, not my students, my own children. And they really enjoy that. I think that's the other thing is, under these circumstances, we can really take advantage of learning as experiences, right? So can you think of, or can you give some examples of some of those teacher approved apps that are really encouraging experiences? I think that's really what parents are yearning for right now, rather than playing games or something like that, right? What are some examples of great experiences that kids can access through some of these new apps that are available?
That's a great question. You know, I think we've looked at across a broad dimensions of that. And are you meaning experiences as in like things to do off screen, or?
No, well, it could be something that's like a combination, like you just mentioned, like you and Larry were just talking about, right? Like maybe they do something on screen, but then it inspires them to do something off screen. I would love for you to even just plug a couple of examples for people to go and look for right away.
Well, okay, let's see. You know, there's a lot of great creativity apps within that I would say are super delightful. I don't know if we specifically call out any specific app. Let's see.
Well, when you sort it on the Google Play Store, do you sort things into, is it really searchable, or do you have apps that you feature? Like when people navigate, what should they be looking for?
That's a great question. So with every single app, you'll have that are teacher approved, you'll see a badge. You can search for it, you can find it. Within the kids tab, everything within that tab is completely teacher approved. You can then filter by ages and interests, which is also great, and be able to find more and drill down into more types of content that you would like for your child.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so Kerry anticipated my next question, but maybe you can elaborate on it, which is the whole question of how do you find apps that are appropriate, fun, and safe? Because I know, unfortunately, just as with iOS, sometimes apps get on the App Store that are eventually taken down, but they can do damage in the meantime. What is some of the advice you give, not just for parents, but in general, for making sure that the apps that you get are the apps that are really going to serve you and not in some way disturb you or harm you or affect your privacy or something?
Totally. So the Design for Families program that was launched was back in 2015, I believe. It really establishes the safety parameters for us, and we've continued to make improvements there. So everything, all the safety checks that are in place for the Design for Families program. Last year, we had another major revamp there, and revamp and improvement. We build off of that. So every app that is teacher approved comes from that pool of content that has been reviewed for safety at the Design for Families level.
And
Okay,
apps
cool.
that may be outside of that ecosystem, I mean, there still may be some that are out there. I mean, what precautions, in addition to going for the teacher approved, what other precautions should people take before they download or start using an app or start giving app permissions?
You know, I just think it's really important for parents just to read up about the app before they download it. I think that's the number one thing. I know that lots of parents find the ratings and reviews helpful as well, or to read more about the developer. I think all of those things are helpful information. We try to provide all those details within the detail pages of an app.
Yeah, and I always look for reviews before I start using an app if I'm not familiar with it already.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Kerry.
I also think that's okay. That's okay. I also think it's really important that while parents are reading up about the app, they're talking to their children about what they're looking for, right? So starting to build those skills in your children. As I'm reading the reviews, this is what I'm looking for. Not just that it's fun or 5 stars because it's fun, quote unquote, but that the parents are talking about, you know, is their child excited after playing, or is their child kind of like blank face after playing?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen the difference in my children after engaging with certain activities online versus others. Some, they finish up and they come and they have so much to tell me. And that's the kind of online experience I want them to have versus the kind where I'm kind of pulling them out of it and saying, hey, like, let's go do something together. How about 5 more minutes? And then they come stumbling out of the room and they, like, you know, barely recognize me, right? And I've recognized the difference. And I know all parents who are watching this recognize the difference. So, you know, there are things that you can look for in those app details, the reviews, more about the developer, right? What else have they developed? And even like taking a look at the terms of use and all of that is really helpful. And taking the time to tell your children that you're examining that, right? To empower them to start learning how to read for those things is really helpful.
That's definitely right.
And if I can add one more thing, regardless of the app you're using, you still can do your own due diligence to protect your privacy, protect your security. If it's an app that allows you to interact with other people, help your children understand what's appropriate to say and what isn't appropriate to say. Certain information shouldn't be shared. And, you know, as Connect Safely writes these parent guides for apps, we find that the advice pretty much stays the same. I mean, apps have different nuances, but any app that allows you to communicate, to share, has essentially the same risks. And those are risks that we carry and that we can control. It's not the app that's revealing personal information about us in most cases. It's our not understanding what we should and shouldn't be saying. So that's so important that parents impart that knowledge to kids.
Speaking of revealing more about yourself, we don't have a ton of time left, Mindy, but we've talked a lot about the products and how your team put them together. But Larry hinted at, and you mentioned a little bit about your work at Sesame. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about you and your experience over the years in this industry and working with content for children, and what you think are kind of the big lessons that you've learned that would be helpful for our viewers to hear.
That's a great question. You know, I started my children's media career at Sesame Street, as you mentioned before, but my background is in educational psychology, developmental psychology. So I kind of come at everything through the lens of understanding where children are from a child development perspective. I started as a researcher, and I started as a researcher at Sesame Street, where we were looking at how to make sure kids are getting the most out of the show, as well as out of digital content. And then I became over research in education. How do we actually make sure that we're infusing the show and infusing content in a way that kids are learning? And so I really take that approach into everything that I do. I went to Netflix after that as the first kids and family researcher, and then here to Google. So I would say after years of talking to kids and parents around the world, I think there's probably 4 things that I would say I've learned. The first of which, and I mentioned this before, the most critical element to designing for kids is to understand developmentally what's going on. I think so often people assume that when they're creating something for kids, that a 12-year-old is the same as a 3-year-old. And they just don't understand that developmentally there's a lot going on, that their fingers don't move in the same way, their brains are not developed in the same way. And so designing an experience, it really has to be thoughtfully thought through from a child development perspective. So that's one thing I would say I've definitely learned. The second one, which we talked on earlier, is the age-old question is, can kids learn from screens? And, you know, that was such a controversial thing back in the day with television, and now we have the same conversation going on now. And I firmly believe, yes, kids can learn from their screen time, can have quality experiences with technology. It's about being thoughtfully designed. The third thing I would say is don't forget the power of delight. And I think we've talked a little bit about that too, with AR having a spark of delight as well. But I mean, think about what a Muppet does, or what beautiful sound effects do, or funny little sound effects that pull kids in and engage with content in unique ways. And that's something that I've learned brings so much to an experience, and also delight. And the last thing I would say is the importance of parents. The importance of parents when you're designing for kids, as well as when parents are thinking about content that is written on two levels, or you think about something that actually brings a parent in, kids get more out of. So think about the Sesame Street show that writes a joke for the parent, the kids never get it, but it's funny to the parent, and then the kids are actually watching the delightful Elmo segment that goes on. That's exactly it, and it brings the parent involved into the experience, co-engagement in a way, and then it really helps with emotional development as well as learning over time. And those are four like principles I think that I've learned and that consistently shows up in any place or space I've worked in.
You know, I love the fact that you bring to the table so much experience from Sesame Street and Netflix, especially Sesame Street. And I'm not exactly sure when you were there, but I know that during the 80s and early 90s, Sesame Street was a staple in my household. And I want to thank you for bringing my children along on the ride. Speaking of the ride, we need to wrap up in just a couple of minutes, but I do want to talk a little bit about what's in store in the future. What's, you know, I know you're not going to tell us any secret projects you're working on, but some general thoughts as to where things are going next and beyond.
You know, I think we've got a lot to do here and continue to make it the Play Store a better place for kids, and continuing to make improvements in Google as well. So I think you'll continue to see us taking steps in this way, or we're committed to this, and we look forward to what we can do in helping kids and parents around the world.
Well, Mindy Brooks, the Director of User Experience at Google Play, we really appreciate your being on Connect Safely Live. Kerry, as always, thanks for your excellent questions and carrying this along.
Thanks, Mindy. Thanks so much, Larry.
Thank you so much.
And take care, everybody.